Guerilla, who I needed to check in with, and said, Tony, this kid's here for the, matches. And then he said, when you're done with Tony, come over to the dressing room and come dress by us. So that was really cool. I'll never forget that. And I told him this years later, and he had his students with him when I was telling him the story. And he said, see, this is why you always, treat people right. And it comes around and all, things like that. But yeah, Fatu took care of me. And then, it's funny because I ended up wrestling against the head shrinkers that
night. So when you get the call to come to WWF at that time in your career, was there nerves with that? Were you what was going through your head? You said you were still green at that time. Like what are you thinking about in that moment?
Honestly, I was terrified. I was nervous, had the butterflies. I couldn't really hold food down, so nervous. And but I was thinking, well, hey, this is an opportunity. This is the whole reason I got into wrestling. This is where I want to be. So, yeah, the nerves took over, and I just knew. I mean, I knew what the role was. I wasn't expecting to, walk in and be like, yeah, I'm gonna, win my match on television and, be a superstar my first day there, kind of thing. So, but still, I didn't want to mess up. That was my main thing. It's like, I don't want to mess up and make these guys look bad or, any of that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was very nerve-wracking.
So what were the early days like in WWF? Like, what was the locker room like? What was that whole atmosphere around that time?
So everyone dressed together. Everyone was like they had maybe 2 locker rooms that they would take over for the talent to be in, and so for the, as they call them now, extras, as they called us then, just locals. We were the locals. You just kind of like try to get in where you can fit in, and a lot of times the local guys were brought by someone. So with Bill not being there, it was a little more difficult for the local guys, because if Bill was there, then everybody knows Bill. So they're like, oh yeah, you're good with us. But like I said, Fatu took care of me and said, I could dress with them. So I set my bag in the locker room, and then I went back a little later after I had to use the restroom or something, went back over, and I walked into the dressing room, was heading over to my bag, and Jerry Sags, Nasty Boys, was like, I don't know how you are with language on this show, but he was like,
go ahead, let it fly.
Yeah, like, who the fuck are you? I'm like, oh, I'm Steve. I want to introduce myself. What are you doing here? I'm like, oh, Fatu said I could dress in here. He's like, all right, you're good. But it was like that. Like, if you don't go where you don't belong, that kind of thing. But once you're invited in, then it was very, they were very inviting as far as like once they knew who you were. The guys were very inviting, but it was a different kind of atmosphere because these were the guys that I watched, and so, when you got these, I don't know, to me, I watched wrestling kind of evolve and change, and the wrestlers evolve and change to where you had guys. I was a small guy. I was, at that time also I was smaller. I was maybe about 210 pounds. So I was just a little guy. Now a 210-pound wrestler is like your average wrestler. So
right.
It was like being in the land of giants, and I'm sure you've heard that saying before, the land of giants, and that's what it felt like to me, being in that locker room. But it was different. You had guys just back there kind of playing cards or hanging out and just kind of, bullshitting with each other and having a good time. And then when it was time to work, it was time to work. So
that's crazy. So Fatu kind of helps you out in the locker room back there. Did you, at that point in your career, did you get the weight of who he was as far as like being tied into that Samoan dynasty of a family? The wild Samoan lineage. Like, did you get that?
Oh yeah, totally. I totally got that, especially with Alpha being there as well. So
yeah,
I'm like, wow. So I already knew. Like, yeah, this means something, and but yeah, I totally understood that. That wasn't lost on me at all.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was it the same day or very recently, didn't you wrestle Razor Ramon as well around that time?
Same day. So my first day, I wrestled 2 matches. So yeah, first was against the Head Shrinkers, and then next was against the Ruckus Razor.
Wow.
And then the next day, we were in Tucson, and that was Yokozuna.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you got
and all I
thrown
remember is the first day, I just remember, watching Yokozuna's matches going, God, I hope I don't get Yokozuna. And then the next day, I get Yokozuna.
What was it like being in the ring with Yoko?
It was scary because it was so intimidating, especially since, I'm sure you guys with your podcast, you talk about the ins and outs. So with Yoko, I introduced myself, said I'm going to be wrestling you tonight, this match. And she's like, all right. I'm like, is there anything specific you want me to know? Anything you want me to, and he's like, we'll lock up and I'll take over from there. That's all I said.
Wow.
So,
wow.
It's like, okay, that's a little scary, because I'm like, all right, now I'm really nervous because I'm like, I really don't want to mess up any of his stuff. And I really didn't know his, like everyone's got their set sequence of how they do things. Right. So, so funny thing about that match, I didn't realize I'm trying to like make him look really good. So we're getting towards the end, shoots me to the corner, gives the big running bonsai, not the bonsai drop, but the where he runs at you, turns in midair, gives you the backsplash, right?
Yeah.
And then you feed out, he gives you the double thrust chop, you land right in place for the bonsai drop. I didn't know this. I take that corner, he hits me full on, I sell it big. I'm like, I'm gonna make this look good. I kind of like stagger out and take a face bump. All I hear when I land is Mr. Fuji go, it's okay. And I'm thinking, oh no. I did something wrong. Yoko picks me up by the hair, and as he's standing me up, he's like, just take a back bump, you're good. Throws me down, and I land, and then he hits the bonsai. I was like, it could have been so much worse because I've seen him, hurt some guys. So. But yeah, so it was one of those things where I didn't pay attention. I didn't know, so I thought I was doing the right thing, and then in doing that, I did the wrong thing. But thankfully, he didn't. He understood because I got to the back. First thing I did, apologize. And he's like, "No, all good, brother. It's all good. I didn't tell you we were doing anything, so we're good." So yeah.
That's a pretty generous pro right there, man.
Oh yeah, especially after seeing him sit on guys' faces and sit on and hurt guys, and but then finding out too that it's really how you carry yourself with them.
Right.
Before with Fatu and Samu, I was teamed up with a guy I never met before, and first thing the head shakers ask is, is there anything you like to do? And this guy starts naming off all of his moves that he likes to hit, and my reply was, and I could just see the look on their faces, like they just kind of looked at each other like, oh, this guy. And my response was just, whatever you need me to do, and that was it. They were like, all right. They pulled me aside, and then they tell me, when we throw you to the corner and you tag out, we're going to throw you out of the ring. Don't get back in. Like, okay. So they do some stuff to me, throw me over for the tag, throw me out of the ring, and I just lay there, and all I hear is this guy screaming. I mean, there was hair in the ring. He was bleeding from the mouth. They're like, yeah, you want to get your shit in? Here you go. Here's
your opportunity.
I actually, from my training, I learned how to be in the locker room as far as like, eyes and ears open and mouth shut, and just you're there to do a job and do it to your best of your ability, and that's it. You're not there to shine. You're not there to get yourself over. You're there to get them over. They're the superstars.
Yeah, it seems like it's a business all about respect.
Oh yes, definitely.
Now you mentioned earlier, Steve, about reservation tours. Now,
Yes.
I've heard a story about you going on a very specific reservation tour with a young John Cena.
Yeah, yes.
What was that tour like? This was when he was the prototype. This was pre-Thugonomics.
Yeah.
What was that tour like with a young John Cena? Tell us a little bit about that time.
So I met John Cena in UPW. So I started wrestling for Rick Bassman in UPW, and John Cena was one of the mainstays of UPW. And so I would bring my students after I, got in, and I bring in Mike Knox, Horseshoe, who became Luther Reigns, Hollywood Yates, who then went on to do the American Gladiators as Wolf, and Gabriel Gallo, who was my tag team partner, Ghostwalker, after a while. So, I would just bring guys in that they loved them. So I got to know John. I said, hey, we're doing these tours, and it's usually like a week. We'll wrestle like 4 nights out of the 6 that were there. And would you like to come? It's a great learning experience. So he's like, of course, So I had John and Mike Knox with me, and we would wrestle. I would wrestle John in a singles match every night, and then Mike Knox would make a big run in at the end of that match, and then my trainer Steve Gatorwolf would make the save, and then that set up for the tag team match later that night. So on these reservation tours, it was very skeleton crew. You would have 4 of the guys basically wrestle twice, and then you'd have another match in there, maybe another match. So it'd be like, 4 matches minimum. Sometimes you get 5 out on the show like that, but we'd entertain them and give them a good time. But John was great. He was a lot of fun to work with.
What was a young John Cena like? What was his demeanor? Because you got to think like a guy who goes as far as he has in the business. He seems like he respects the business, and he's pretty much gave his all to the business. So seeing him at that stage of his career, did you see anything in him? What was he like at that time?
He was a workhorse. He was one of those guys that, you can just tell by looking at him that he puts the work in. His body, he was, looked like the prototype name fit him because he looked like what the prototype of a professional athlete would be. Just great shape, always working hard, and then always asking questions and asking how well, why did we do this? Why, and I explained my reasoning behind it. He's like, oh, okay, And then it got to the point to where on that tour, I let him start calling the matches. I'm like, you're the heel. I want you to call it. I want you, then we can work on the flow and those kind of things. But he was very excited to be able to do that, to be able to call matches and set the pace of a match and learn, each night, because then we could change it up every night. We'd wrestle in front of a different crowd every night. It wouldn't be, weeks between matches. It would be the next night. So we could fix what we thought needed to be fixed, or change something up, or try something new. And he was up for that. And he was a lot of fun to travel with, because he liked to have fun. He liked to joke around and have a good time. He's still the same. I saw him at SummerSlam, and he's still the same guy. He's just now, John Cena. But then he was John. It was just
That's great,
but
man.
yeah, I could definitely. The first time I saw him, I could see. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's got money written on him as far as like just the look, And then watching him wrestle, I was like, it needs work. You could tell, but he'll get there, and he did. And then look where he's at now.
Yeah.
So when was the Navajo Warrior character born? When did you take on this character?
I want to say it was 2001, 2000, around that time. I was when I started, I was wanted to do the Native American gimmick, but my trainer Steve Gatorwolf was like, hey, there's only room for one Indian on the show, kind of thing. So I was like, all right, I got you. So I was, trying different characters, different gimmicks, different things. I was the Iceman, just because of the name. They called me that in high school when I was wrestling because my coach couldn't pronounce my last name, so he called me Iceman. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, okay, what can I do with this? Well, at that time, this is early '90s, right? Ice, Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby. I was like, that was my ring music. I would dance to the ring. It was ridiculous, but always wanted to do the native gimmick though, and so finally it got to the point where my trainer said, you know what, we can do something with this and have you, since we were on the Navajo reservation all the time, we're going to call you the Navajo Kid. I was like, that's kind of cheesy. I didn't like it, but I went with it because I'm like, oh, here's my chance. And I wrestled as the Navajo Kid, and then the Navajo Warrior came by complete accident. I was wrestling a dark match for WWE, and Howard Finkel introduced me as the Navajo Kid. Wrestled the match, got the win, and he announced the winner, Navajo Warrior. Complete mistake. But I heard, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm changing the name. How long can you be the kid? It's one
right.
of those things where it's like, I'm in my 20s, or late 20s. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be the kid. So it was all thanks to Howard, and I made sure I told him this. I'm like, you named me. He's like, yeah, that was a mistake, right? But I was giving him credit for that.
Yeah, but it probably sounded pretty good coming out of Finkel's mouth, right? Like that. That probably helped a lot.
With Howard, exactly. That voice and that announcement, I was just like, it meant something, and so I held on to it.
Absolutely. Now, like, what did it mean for you to bring a character to the ring that kind of honored your heritage?
It meant a lot. I mean, that's the reason I wanted to do this character. I wanted to be representing not only the Navajo, but all native tribes, as best I could. I know we're all different, but we all have a lot of similarities. So I kind of brought that to the ring. I would wear a feather headdress, even though in Navajo we don't wear the feather headdress, and so I would wear that for a while, and I would just kind of change things up a little bit. But then when I was wrestling for Rick Bassman years later, he wanted a heel turn. I was like, okay, figure something out. And then he pulled me aside and was like, Nav, right now you're like Tatanka, you're like Wahoo McDaniel, you're like all the native wrestlers that came before you. Why don't you be the first you? And it's like, oh, okay. Then the wheels started turning, and I was like, all right. I started thinking of stories that my grandfather would tell me, and different, about, because I was going to be a heel, about, the Skinwalkers and bad medicine and things like this. So the things I would picture in my head as he would tell me these stories when I was a kid, I kind of put them on paper, and that's how I came up with my face paint design and started wearing the wolf skin and changing the gear and changing the character, and so that was something that when I go back to the reservation, I couldn't really do. I mean, I did it once and I never did it again because the elders were like, no, that's bad. Don't do that. But the kids thought it was the greatest thing they'd ever seen, but the elders was like, don't bring that here. Don't do that. So every time I go back to the reservation, the wolfskin stays home. The paint changes. It's a whole different Navajo Warrior than everywhere else.
What was it about that and the culture that made them kind of step back from that character?
Skinwalkers are something we don't really talk about, just because it's so dark and real, So
right.
it's so we don't wear the skins of animals. We don't wear, like the furs and things like that. We don't do that. And for me to kind of do that was looked at as disrespectful. So I didn't want to disrespect the elders. I didn't want to disrespect my culture, and by doing that there,
Right.
So it's just hard. It's hard to explain it, but I'm sure you get the idea.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Honoring, honoring the elders. I mean, that's highly respectable. So
Yeah, it's all about respect.
yeah. How did you link up with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood? Like, because you had worked with them like as early as what, 2009, 2010, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I was at the very first Championship Wrestling from Hollywood tapings at I think it was CBS Studios. Um, but I knew David Marquez from UPW, so David Marquez would do the production. So he would be doing the television, and I actually knew of David Marquez before UPW when he was in Missouri working for Harley Race, and so this is back in the '90s, mid to late '90s. Back then, there was no YouTube, there was no way to really get your stuff out there besides putting a videotape together, your promotional shots, your resume, and mailing them out. So he got my promo package and wanted to bring me into Missouri. For some reason, we couldn't get the timing right to where I could make it when they wanted me to be there, that type of thing. But I didn't realize that this was the same person I was dealing with when years later at UPW, he's there as the running that production, and but that's how I got with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. So meeting David through UPW, I would go and watch his setup. He had his monitors all set up, and watching him, cut to camera two, go one, doing his magic, and just being amazed by it. I'd get my match done, and then I'd go back again, and I just sit there and watch him, watch him do his stuff. Yeah, I think Cena used to call him the Wizard or something like that. It was like he had a nickname. I was like, yeah, this is great. But yeah, and then when Championship Wrestling from Hollywood was going to start, David reached out to me and said, "Would you like to be a part of it?" And I said, "Of course." And we were off to the races.
So I'm guessing that led into your primetime wrestling, because Dave was behind primetime wrestling, right? And you
Yes.
took some time away from wrestling. What, around 2014 to 2017? What?
Yes.
What brought you back to primetime wrestling?
My love for wrestling. That time period that I kind of stepped away. Excuse me. Excuse me. But that time that I stepped away, I wouldn't say burnt out, but I thought I wanted to be something different, besides who I really am, and so I thought getting away from wrestling would be better for me, and getting away from all of it. When I stepped away, I stepped away. I mean, I didn't really even talk to a lot of the people that I associated with in wrestling, and just kind of tried to be something else, that I wasn't. And so I came back and was happier than ever, because you realize that I was just making myself miserable getting away from something that I loved so much. And so, what brought me back was, like I said, my love for wrestling.
That's awesome. So I have to ask, you bring up your love of wrestling. We typically ask this question. We usually lead with it, but we didn't with you. But now that you're talking about the love of wrestling, I have to ask, when you were a fan before you started wrestling and you were just a fan, who were your guys? Who were the wrestlers you loved watching growing up?
Right. Number one, Hulk Hogan. He was the reason I wanted to be a wrestler. Um, I went to my first live show in 1983. The AWA came to Phoenix, and their main event was a big battle royal. And Hulk Hogan was also in a body slam challenge match against Jerry Blackwell, and just feeling that electricity when Eye of the Tiger started playing, you could almost feel the building vibrate, and then seeing him come out, the way he could control that crowd. I was going crazy, myself, just jumping up, screaming and yelling. And I was like, man, if I could do that'd be awesome. But yeah, he was my number one. Tito Santana was a great one. I loved watching. Andre the Giant, and then when Randy Savage came in, Randy Savage was a lot of fun to watch. Arn Anderson, uh, he wasn't flashy, he wasn't, but he was real to me. Greg the Hammer
Right.
Valentine, another guy that was just like, wow. These are some guys out there just kicking some ass, and so I thought that was really cool. Those were the kind of guys that I like to watch.
That's awesome.
I love Arn Anderson too. Like
Yeah.
and but for that reason, man, I think he's one of my favorites of all time. So what made you
To me, he was like that uncle that you want to piss off.
Yeah. Yeah. So what made you want to become more than a fan? What made you want to become, step into the ring and become a professional wrestler?
Like I said a little earlier about that with Hulk Hogan, like just watching him turn and look his direction. He looks one side of the crowd and they just erupt, and he's just looking, and just seeing that it's like a maestro conducting a symphony, and so to me, I was like, that is really cool. As a kid, I was always into superheroes, comics, Batman, Superman, and then music. I like Kiss. I was drawing were larger than life, and so seeing professional wrestling live, I was like, these guys are larger than life, man. It's something that I think I could do, and I wanted to do it. And that's what made me want to do it, because it's like I can be what I like to watch. I can be that. I want to be that, and that's what drew me to wanting to become a wrestler and not just a fan.
That's amazing. Now, I saw you post some pictures on your Instagram of WrestleMania weekend. Now, you've been working, right? You worked Mania weekend. Like, can you talk a little bit about what you did on Mania weekend and how that all came to be?
So since 2008, I've been working with the WWE on the video games. So I worked in 2008. I worked for THQ, and then when THQ lost the license and 2K picked it up, I went with the license over to 2K. So I basically, the title is licensing manager for the WWE, but it doesn't really explain what I do. so on the video game titles, I produce, I babysit, I handle getting scans, voiceover report, appearances. I'll escort the talent for appearances. Just anything that has to do with the talent and the video game, I'm involved in.
Oh, that's awesome. So what's it like? Okay, you're in your first match against the Head Shrinkers in 1993, and now you're seeing where this company is now at WrestleMania at Raymond James Stadium. What is the difference, and how mind-blowing is it for you to be around what this company is today?
I missed the question part of that because it was like cutting in and out.
When from the time you had your first match in 1993 to being at Raymond James Stadium, what's it like seeing the spectacle that this company has became? Like, would 1993 Steve even imagine that this company is where it is today?
Oh yeah, yeah. That to see the growth, and just it's amazing. Yeah, in 1993, I wouldn't have pictured it getting as big as it is. The production of it, the spectacle of it, and people coming in from different countries to attend, a WrestleMania, or the company being worldwide. It's always been called World Wrestling Federation or World Wrestling Entertainment, but I mean, it truly is, worldwide. and so it's amazing to see that, and the amount of work that goes into it, just seeing how big it's gotten as far as like just in an arena, just the setup alone, how it's changed. You know, I always thought it was cool, the neon walkway that we would come out through, and now it's like a big stage, and yeah, it's just grown so much. But it's amazing to see. But like going to like WrestleMania Access and seeing that old entranceway, it's just like, yeah, this was the shit back then.
Yeah, man, I gotta know. So I gotta know, man, how did you get involved with the video game side of it? How did you get involved in producing and doing everything on the video game side?
So, around 2006, they were THQ and they were looking for wrestlers to do motion capture for the video game, and I was approached by the motion capture directors and asked if I would be interested in doing it, and then so of course I did, and that was pretty cool. You know, you're wearing the motion capture suit and you're doing the moves, and then it kind of grew from there, because I would kind of go above and beyond and kind of give ideas and different ways of doing things, because difficult it was to do a stop on certain moves when you're doing motion capture. So I would just kind of give suggestions, and then it kind of went from there to like, oh, would you like to consult? Yeah, that'd be great. You know, kind of got put into that. So I got to start to know the guys that worked on the video game from THQ, and the person that was the licensing director, you know, manager then, got to know him, and then it kind of grew from there, because then I would still be doing the extra work for WWE, and then I would see him at TV doing, you know, reference photos or scans and things like that. So we'd see each other, and then one day he just said, "Look, I really want to get into the creative end of games, and I have the opportunity to work on a different game, but I need to find somebody to kind of be my replacement." And so I kind of shadowed him for a couple of days, and was like, this could be cool. I think I'd like to do this. And then I could pull back on the amount of wrestling I'm doing and focus on this. And then we were from there.
And that's awesome.
Yeah,
that sounds like such a fun job.
It is. I mean, it's one of those where like I don't, you know, I think it is a lot of fun. I mean, it's a lot of hard work, but it's also a lot of fun. And being in that environment and being around wrestling, you know, even though I'm not in the ring, I'm still around it. I'm still around the boys. I'm still around the, you know, the lifestyle, the everything about it. You know, just being around it.
Yep.
I'm still a part of it.
Yeah, that's a wild journey, man. From being, you know, facing the head shrinkers in '93, and you're working with a video game company there WrestleMania weekend doing scans of pro wrestlers. It's like two worlds colliding, but still keeping you in that business.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I never would have thought, you know, 1993, I was thinking, oh, 10 years, then I'll stop wrestling, you know, that kind of thing. And here we are, you know, 20 some years later, you know, I'm still around it. So
with over 30 years in the business, can you talk a little bit about just how the business has changed from your vantage point? Maybe like a positive that you see and then a negative that you see in the way the business has changed in those 30 years.
Okay. A positive is the wrestlers are much better athletes than we were. They can do amazing things that we couldn't even think of doing. They do on a regular now in their matches, and so that's a big positive, is that the guys are so much more athletic. Negative is it's kind of the same thing, because they're so athletic. It's like they push themselves to do so much more, and it's kind of like not letting the fans want more. They're kind of giving them everything at once and not leaving the fans wanting to see something. So it's like you can't really build on it. The storytelling's kind of to where the athleticism's increased and the storytelling's dropped back. So to me, that's a negative, because then it's almost like Crash TV. You're wanting to just see all the oohs and ahs and not the story behind it that's going to make you want to come back and watch again. So it's harder on their bodies, I'm afraid to see what they're going to look like in 20 years.
Yeah.
When I see the guys, that, I mean, Hulk Hogan he dropped the leg drop every night. He's had 10 back surgeries, and that's from a leg drop. And these guys are, diving from inside the ring out to the floor every night, and sometimes not getting caught. Sometimes these guys are just crashing and burning. So it matters to feel like in 20 years, and it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah.
So what do you consume any of the current product? Is there any wrestling that you're watching these days? Any of the major companies?
I actually try to watch all of it. I'm still a fan. I still love wrestling. I'll watch Raw and SmackDown, watch NXT, I'll watch Dynamite, I'll watch Rampage, I'll watch, so if I can't sit and watch it as it's happening, I'll record it and I'll watch it. I'll catch Impact, I'll catch Ring of Honor, so any wrestling that's on, I'm looking forward to seeing the MLW on Thursday night, with
Fightland.
Yeah. Hammerstone's an Arizona guy, he's a kid that man, he impresses me, and just watching how he's grown and changed over the years. It's been really cool. Now I want to see him with his championship opportunity tomorrow night, so it'll be great.
Yeah, him and Jacob Fatu is going to tear the house down.
Oh yeah, and Jacob, oh my gosh, yeah. Getting to watch him, it's been pretty cool, because I remember when he was just a little kid coming to the show with his dad, and because I would do stuff with TK, with Tonga Kid, and with all of them as well, and so he was one of the kids running around, even the twins, Jimmy and Jey Uso. It's funny because they're always calling me like OG, because oh yeah, you know Pops, so it's pretty funny.
That's awesome. So last question for you. We always ask this, you're on the road, you're making towns. You can have any 3 wrestlers, alive or dead, in that car with you making towns. What 3 wrestlers are you picking?
Ooh. Well, Hogan for sure, just because I'm a huge fan, and plus I think we ended up getting into the best restaurant with Hulk, with Hulk traveling. But I would learn a lot, and then so let's see, Hulk. Wow, I would say, excuse me, just to listen, just listen to him. Hulk, Steamboat, and probably Andre, just for the drinking stories, just to be able to see them firsthand.
Yeah. Yeah. I love Steamboat. Steamboat is just, everyone loves him, but I still feel like even as much as people respect him, he's still not appreciated enough. Like, he's one of the all-time greats.
Right. I agree on that part. He's smooth, so smooth in the ring. And I've been, blessed and lucky enough to get to kind of pick the brains of these guys. When I wrestled against Chris Benoit, Ricky Steamboat was our producer or agent for that match, which I had no idea because I had like a match was going on in the ring, and I was told, "Go get in your gear. You're wrestling, you know, Benoit like next." So I had no time to even know who our producer was or anything. I was lacing up my boots in gorilla position, getting ready to go out to the ring. So, but it wasn't until afterward. And then he pulled me aside and, you know, kind of thanked me for the match and gave me some props for some of the things I did in the match. And then I got to ask him questions. So I was just like, okay, cool. This is your opportunity to start, you know, asking and learning a little bit from him as you can. And then getting to see him until then we have conversations. So, you know, getting to learn from Ricky Steamboat or Arn Anderson, who's I'm a left-handed fighter. I'm southpaw, and Arn's a left-handed one. So, kind of getting critique from him on punches and things like that, because throwing a left-handed punch just looks odd.
Yeah.
So, trying to teach her to throw a punch, you know, because we already look off when we throw punches because we're left-handed. So. Then I started to pull back on the punches and start throwing more forearms and something, you know, just things like, you know, so like being able to kind of ask these guys questions and learn from them, it's been really cool. I've been blessed. I've been lucky.
That's awesome. So Steve, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
All right. Well, on Twitter, which I'm trying to get better at using, it is at Wrestling Tribe. That is the Twitter handle. And then Instagram is Navajo Warrior, the number 2, letter K. Navajo Warrior 2K. Those are my two main ones. Facebook's more like friends and family. Some wrestling fans are on there, but most of the stuff I post is usually Instagram. Then it just goes on to the Facebook. You know, it's the same posted on Instagram and just connects to it. But that's where you can find me. Any merchandise, prowrestlingtees.com/Navajo Warrior. That's where you can find some cool design made for me, like that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, man, it's been great having you stop by. If you ever want to stop by again, you always have a seat here at the tavern. We appreciate it. We hope you have a good weekend in Orlando.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Have a good
night. Thank you. Wish me luck. It's going to be all right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.